All right, let's dive in. Today, we're really unpacking the physical geography of India.
Yeah, it's a huge topic.
It is. We've got a whole stack of sources here, articles, notes, the usual stuff covering its location, the climate story, which is fascinating, the natural vegetation, and the natural hazards it faces.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission, basically, is to pull out the key insights, really get a feel for how these physical elements shape the country.
And what's really interesting, I think, is seeing how interconnected it all is. It's not just separate pieces.
Exactly.
It's this complex relationship between the land, the weather, what grows there, and, the challenges people face from nature itself. It all fits together.
Totally. So for you listening, think of us as guides, sort of piecing this puzzle together.
Yeah.
We want to help you see how India's position on the map, its climate, especially the monsoon, of course.
The big one.
The big one, its plants. And the natural hazards aren't just isolated facts. They're all threads in one big story.
A geographical narrative, really.
Yeah. Okay, let's get into it. Let's start with the basics, where India is and just how big it is.
Right. The sheer scale is the first thing you notice.
Mm-hmm.
The mainland stretches from Kashmir way up north down to Kanyakumari at the southern tip.
Right.
And then from Arunachal Pradesh in the far east across to Gujarat in the west. That's a huge spread. We're talking roughly 30 degrees of latitude and 30 degrees of longitude.
Okay, 30 degrees both ways. But there's a little quirk there, isn't there? The sources point out the north-south distance is actually longer, 3,214 kilometers, than the east-west distance, which is 2,933 kilometers.
Right.
How does that work if the degree span is similar?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's basically down to how globes work, how maps are projected.
Okay.
Lines of latitude, they run parallel to the equator, right?
Yeah.
So the distance between each degree is more or less constant.
Right.
But lines of longitude, they all meet up at the poles. So as you go further north, those lines get closer and closer together.
Oh.
So because India stretches quite far north, the distance covered by 1 degree of longitude up there is less than it is near the equator. That squeezing means the total east-west kilometer count is lower, even with the same 30-degree span.
That makes sense. A neat little geographical effect with real-world distance implications. And that latitudinal spread you mentioned, that 30 degrees north-south, that must completely change things climatically.
Oh, fundamentally. It basically splits India in two, climate-wise. The southern part is firmly in the tropics.
So hot all year round.
Pretty much, yeah. High temperatures, not a huge difference between summer and winter, or even day and night sometimes. But the northern part, that's subtropical or warm temperate.
Meaning more extremes.
Big time. You get proper seasons, hot summers, cold winters, sometimes huge swings in temperature even in one day. This north-south difference is like a major driver for variations in every landforms, climate details, soil types, what grows where.
It sets the stage for diversity. And what about the east-west spread? That 30 degrees of longitude, that affects time, right?
Absolutely. The sun rises almost 2 hours earlier in Arunachal Pradesh on the eastern edge compared to Gujarat way out west.
2 hours, so you definitely need a standard time.
You couldn't function without it. That's why India has Indian Standard Time, IST. They picked a standard meridian, 82 degrees, 30 minutes east.
Okay.
Which is halfway through that spread. And it's a multiple of 7.5 degrees, which is sort of a standard way countries do this.
Right.
And it means everyone's watch shows the same time, whether you're in, say, Dibrugarh in the east or Jaisalmer in the west. It keeps daily life synchronized.
Unlike, say, the U.S. or Russia with multiple time zones.
Exactly. Their east-west spread is just too vast for one zone.
Puts India's size into perspective. And speaking of size, the sources confirm it's the 7th largest country globally.
That's right. 3.28 million square kilometers, which sounds huge, and it is, but it's about 2.4% of the Earth's total land area.
Still, enough space for incredible variety.
Oh, absolutely. That scale is what allows for the kind of physical diversity we were talking about. You've got the Himalayas, these massive mountains.
Lice in the world.
Yeah. Then the huge river plains, Ganga, Brahmaputra, super fertile.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the ancient hills and plateaus of the peninsula, dense forests, and then the far desert out west. It's a real mix.
And this whole area, geographically bounded by the mountains and the ocean, forms the Indian subcontinent.
Right. The sources define that as, including not just India, but also Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh. They share this sort of geographical space defined by these big natural barriers.
Like the Himalayas acting as a huge wall, historically.
Pretty much. Passage was mostly limited to a few mountain passes. The Khyber Pass, Bolan Pass, places like that. It helped create a distinct regional identity over centuries.
And then there's the coastline. India juts right out into the Indian Ocean.
A very long coastline. The mainland alone is 6,100 kilometers.
Wow.
But then you add the islands Andaman and Nicobar, Lakshadweep, and the total geographical coast jumps to over 7,500 kilometers.
Okay, so pulling this first part together. India's specific location, its coordinates, and its sheer size. These are the absolute fundamentals. They create the potential for all the diversity we see.
Exactly. It's the foundation for everything else.
Which leads us perfectly into the climate. India's climate is synonymous with one word, really. Monsoon.
The monsoon, yeah. It defines so much.
But before we jump into the monsoon itself, quick clarification. Weather versus climate. People sometimes mix them up.
Yeah. Simple distinction, but important. Weather is like what's happening outside right now or this week. Is it sunny, raining, windy? It changes fast.
Okay.
Climate is the long-term average of that weather. Like what's the typical pattern for a place over, say, 30 years or more? Climate is the wardrobe. Weather is the outfit you pick today. Climate changes much more slowly.
Got it. So India's climate is described as hot monsoonal.
That's the label, yeah. It's typical for South and Southeast Asia. And monsoon itself, the word, comes from an Arabic word for season. The absolute key feature is that seasonal reversal of winds.
Winds changing direction dramatically between seasons.
Exactly, which brings distinct wet and dry periods. That's the core of it.
And while that monsoon pattern gives a kind of unity to the whole region's climate, there's still massive diversity within that system, right?
There are huge diversity. Everyone experiences the rhythm of the seasons, sure, but the details, how hot it gets, how cold, how much rain falls, when it falls, that varies enormously across the country.
Some of the temperature examples in the sources are just incredible. Like 55 degrees Celsius in Rajasthan.
Yeah, blistering heat in the west.
On the same June day, it's only 19 degrees in Tawang, way up in the northeast. That's a 36-degree difference.
It's wild. And think winter. It could be minus 45 degrees Celsius in Dras in Ladakh.
Minus 45.
While folks in Chennai or Thiruvananthapuram are sitting comfortably at, say, 20 or 22 degrees on the same night.
Wow.
Even the daily range can be extreme. The Thar Desert might swing from 50 degrees daytime down to 15 or 20 at night. That's a massive diurnal range.
Day-night difference.
Right. Compare that to somewhere coastal, like Kerala or the Andaman Islands, where the difference might only be 7 or 8 degrees, much more stable.
And the rainfall variations are just as stark. You mentioned Masinram and Cherrapunji getting over 1,000 centimeters.
Yeah, 10 meters of rain. It's staggering.
While Jaisalmer, out in the desert, might barely see 10 centimeters in a whole year.
It's worlds apart. And only the Himalayas get snow. Everywhere else, it's rain. These huge contrasts are all down to a few key factors controlling India's climate.
Okay, like latitude. We touched on that splitting north and south.
Exactly. That Tropic of Cancer is a key dividing line. South of it, it's tropical, always hot. North of it, subtropical, temperate. You get the seasonal extremes. Altitude's another big one.
Temperature drops as you go higher.
Right. Basic physics, but hugely important. It's why hill stations like Darjeeling are cool even though they're on the same latitude as hotter plain cities like Agra.
And the Himalayas, you said they're like a wall.
They're the most important climatic feature, arguably. Two main things. First, they block those freezing cold winds blowing down from Siberia and Central Asia. Without them, northern India would be much colder in winter.
Okay.
Second, and this is crucial for the monsoon, they act as a massive barrier. They physically stop the moisture-filled monsoon winds, forcing them to rise, cool, and dump their rain over India.
Trapping the rain, basically.
Exactly. And then there's the whole land versus water heating thing.
Right, that drives the wind reversal.
It's the engine of the monsoon. Land heats up and cools down way faster than the ocean. So in summer, the huge Indian landmass gets incredibly hot.
Creates low pressure.
A massive low pressure zone. Meanwhile, oceans around India are relatively cooler, so they have higher pressure.
Yeah.
Winds always want to blow from high to low pressure.
So they'll blow from the ocean onto the land, carrying moisture.
Bingo. That's your summer southwest monsoon. In winter, it reverses. The land cools down fast, becoming high pressure, while the ocean stays relatively warmer, lower pressure. So the winds blow from land out to sea, the drier northeast monsoon.
And just being near the sea makes a difference, too.
Big difference. Coastal areas, like Mumbai, have what's called an equable or maritime climate. The ocean acts like a giant thermostat. moderating temperatures. Not too hot, not too cold.
Milder,
less fluctuation. But places deep inland, Delhi, Kanpur, they have a continental climate. Very hot summers, very cold winters. Big swings.
Okay, so all these factors, latitude, mountains, land water, altitude, sea distance, they all mix together to create India's seasons. How many main seasons do they identify?
The Indian Meteorological Department usually talks about 4 main seasons.
Okay.
First, the cold weather season. That's roughly mid-November to February.
Winter.
Right. Peak cold is usually December and January, especially in the north. Average temps can drop below 21 Celsius, and places like Punjab or Rajasthan can even touch freezing.
And why so cold up there?
It's a mix. That continental effect we mentioned, distance from the sea, plus cold waves coming down from snowfall in the Himalayas. And sometimes cold winds sneak in from further west, like around the Caspian Sea region.
And these winter monsoon winds are mostly dry, blowing from land to sea.
Generally, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a couple of important exceptions. You get these weak storms called temperate cyclones or western disturbances that come in from the Mediterranean area.
All the way from the Med.
Yeah, they travel eastward and bring light, but really crucial winter rain to northwest India. It's perfect for the winter crops, the rabi crops like wheat.
Oh!
And you also get snowfall in the Himalayas then, which feeds the rivers later. And one other big exception. Down on the southeast coast, Tamil Nadu especially gets its main rainy season in October, November.
From the other months.
From the retreating or northeast monsoon. As those winds cross the Bay of Bengal on their way back, they pick up moisture and dump heavy rain on that coast.
Okay, so after winter comes.
The hot weather season, March to May, sometimes into early June. Temperatures just climb and climb, especially across north and central India.
Right.
Starts in the Deccan in March, spreads north. By May, the northwest can be hitting, 48 degrees Celsius. Intense heat.
Oof. Is that hot everywhere?
No. The south generally stays milder, moderated by the ocean, usually in the 26 to 32 degree range. And hill stations, like in the Western Ghats, offer cool relief, maybe below 25 degrees.
And all that heat builds up that low pressure you mentioned.
Exactly. Setting the stage for the main event, the southwest monsoon season, June to September.
The rainy season.
The main one, yes. That intense low pressure over the hot northwest plains acts like a vacuum, sucking in the trade winds from the southern hemisphere.
Winds crossing the equator.
Yep, they cross the equator, get deflected to the right by the Earth's rotation, that's the Coriolis effect.
Ah, yes.
Pick up enormous amounts of moisture from the warm Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal, and sweep across India from a southwesterly direction.
And it often starts suddenly. The sources mention a burst.
Yeah, it's often not a gradual start. It can be quite abrupt, the burst of the monsoon. Thunder, lightning, a sudden heavy downpour, and a noticeable drop in temperature. Big relief after the heat.
When and where does it usually start?
Typically hits the Kerala coast, down south around June 1st. Then it progresses northwards, reaches Mumbai and Kolkata maybe June 10th to 13th, and usually covers the whole subcontinent by mid-July.
The mechanics behind it sound really complex. Things like the ITCZ, jet streams.
It is complex. It involves large-scale atmospheric shifts. The ITCZ, that's the Intertropical Convergence Zone, a low-pressure belt near the equator where winds meet. It shifts northward over India, settling over the Gangetic Plain around July.
Creating the monsoon trough.
Exactly. That monsoon trough is like the focal point for the low pressure, pulling the moist winds in. And then things like the upper air jet streams, shifting position, play a role in both the onset and the withdrawal later. Even things happening far away, like El Nino.
That warming in the Pacific.
Right, off the coast of Peru. That can mess with the atmospheric patterns globally and impact the Indian monsoon's strength and timing. It makes forecasting tricky.
And even during the main rainy season, the rain isn't constant. There can be dry spells.
Correct. Those are called monsoon breaks. Can last a few days or even longer. They happen for various reasons. Maybe the monsoon trough shifts its position, or the rain-bearing storm systems just aren't forming as frequently for a bit. On the west coast, sometimes the winds blow parallel to the coast instead of onshore, causing a break.
And this southwest monsoon, it splits into branches.
It does, 2 main ones. The Arabian Sea branch hits the Western Ghats first. Loads of rain on the western slopes, the windward side.
Right.
But much less rain on the eastern side, the leeward side, which is in the rain shadow.
Okay.
Part of that branch goes north towards Mumbai and central India. Another part curves towards Rajasthan, but doesn't bring much rain there. The other main branch is the Bay of Bengal branch.
Where does that go?
It hits Myanmar and Bangladesh first, gets deflected by hills there towards India, Then it splits again. One part moves west along the Ganga Plains toward Punjab. The other part goes straight up the Brahmaputra Valley into the northeast.
Which is why the Northeast gets so much rain.
Exactly. That branch gets funneled into the hills, like the Khasi Hills where Mount Sinram is. Forces the air up. Massive rainfall.
So, quick question then. Why does the Tamil Nadu coast stay pretty dry during this big southwest monsoon?
Good question. Two reasons, basically. It lies parallel to the path of the Bay of Bengal branch, so those winds don't hit it directly.
Okay.
And it's in the rain shadow of the Western Ghats for the Arabian Sea branch. So it misses out on both, mostly. It gets its rain later.
During the fourth season, the retreating monsoon.
Precisely. October and November. The intense low over the northwest weakens and starts shifting south. The southwest winds weaken and withdraw.
What's the weather like then?
It's a transition. Often you get clear skies, but humidity can still be high, leading to what's sometimes called October heat. Quite uncomfortable. Then, especially in the north, temperatures start to drop quite rapidly as winter approaches.
And while the north gets drier.
The southeast coast gets hammered. This is when the northeast monsoon kicks in properly. Winds blowing from the northeast, crossing the Bay of Bengal, picking up moisture, and delivering torrential rain to Tamil Nadu, southern Andhra, parts of Karnataka, and Kerala.
So summing up the rainfall, the average across India is around 125 centimeters a year, but that average number hides massive differences.
Totally. That average figure doesn't tell you much. You've got the super high rainfall areas, west coast, western Ghats, northeast, getting over 200 centimeters, sometimes way over.
Right.
Then medium zones, 100, 200 centimeters, covering quite large areas. Then low rainfall zones, 50, 100 centimeters, including places like Delhi, Punjab, much of the Deccan Plateau. And finally, the really dry areas, less than 50 centimeter parts of the interior peninsula, Ladakh, and most of western Rajasthan.
It's so clear the monsoon isn't just weather, it's everything.
It dictates agriculture, water supply, lifestyles.
Mm-hmm.
The diversity it allows is huge, but so is the risk droughts one year, floods the next, sometimes in the same region.
Yeah.
Agriculture is so dependent on it being timely and adequate. Heavy downpours cause erosion. The regional differences shape food, clothing, housing. It's fundamental.
And the sources briefly mention global warming in this context.
They do. Just noting that while climate has always changed naturally, human activity, industrialization, greenhouse gases like CO2, methane is accelerating things now.
The greenhouse effect getting stronger.
Right, trapping more heat, raising global temperatures.
Yeah.
The sources mention projections of maybe a 2 degree C rise by 2100 and the potential impacts like melting ice, rising sea levels.
Yeah.
It's a global issue that adds another layer of complexity to India's climate situation.
Definitely. Okay, let's shift from climate to what grows naturally because of it, India's vegetation.
Natural vegetation, yeah. So this is the plant life that grows on its own, without humans planting it, adapted to the local conditions.
Right, not farms or gardens. And given the climate diversity, there must be huge vegetation variety too. The sources list 5 main types.
That's right. Tropical evergreen and semi-evergreen, tropical deciduous, tropical thorn, montane, which means mountain forests, and littoral and swamp forests.
Okay, let's start with evergreen. Sounds like places that are always wet.
You got it. Tropical evergreens need warm, humid conditions, lots of rain over 200 centimeters, and warm temperatures, average above 22 degrees C.
Where do you find those?
Mostly western slopes of the Western Ghats, the northeastern hills, and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. These are those really dense, lush, multi-layered rainforests. Tall trees up to 60 meters or more, climbers, shrubs, just packed with life.
And evergreen because they don't lose their leaves.
Well, individual trees do, but they don't all shed at the same time. There's no distinct leafless season, so the forest looks green all year round. Think valuable hardwoods like rosewood, mahogany, ebony.
Okay, then tropical deciduous. Deciduous means they do shed leaves, right? Tied to the seasons.
Exactly. These are also called monsoon forests because their cycle is tied to the wet and dry seasons. They're actually the most widespread forest type in India.
Really? More than evergreen.
Yep, they cover the largest area typically where rain falls between 70 and 200 centimeters. They get divided into moist deciduous, 100, 200 centimeter rain, found in places like Himalayan foothills, eastern Ghat slopes with key trees like teak and sal.
Important timber trees.
Very. And then dry deciduous, 70 to 100 centimeters rain, covering huge areas of the peninsula and the northern plains. The defining thing here is that during the long dry season, the trees shed all their leaves to save water.
So they look quite different then.
Totally different. In the peak dry season, these forests can look quite open, almost like parkland, with bare trees. Common trees include tondu, palas, amaltas. In the drier parts, like towards Rajasthan, if there's overgrazing too, it can become very sparse scrub.
Makes sense. Okay, third type, tropical thorn forests. Sounds dry.
Very dry. Less than 50 centimeters of rain. You find these in the semi-arid regions, southwest Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, Gujarat, parts of MP and UP.
What do they look like?
Dominated by thorny bushes, scrubs, grasses. Plants are adapted to drought, often small leaves or leafless for much of the year. Think babool, bear, wild date palm, often quite low, scrubby vegetation.
Got it. Now, montane forests, the mountain ones, vegetation must change a lot with altitude.
Dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
As you go up, temperature drops and the vegetation changes in distinct zones. In the Himalayas, it's like a sequence from tropical as foothills up through temperate forests with oak and chestnut.
Mm-hmm.
Then pine forests, like Chur pine. Higher still, valuable conifers like deodar, great timber, and blue pine, spruce. Then above the tree line, around 3,000, 4,000 meters, you get alpine forests and meadows with silver fir, juniper, birch, rhododendron.
Alpine meadows, like in Switzerland.
Similar idea, yeah. And these high pastures are vital for nomadic herding communities. Gujars, Bakarwals, Bhutias, Gaddis, they practice transhumance.
Moving livestock seasonally.
Exactly. Up to the high pastures in summer when the snow melts, back down to the valleys in winter. It's a traditional way of life linked directly to this mountain vegetation pattern. And above the alpine zone, you eventually get tundra, just mosses and lichens.
Wow, quite a range. Okay, last type, littoral and swamp forests. Sounds wet.
Yep, these are the forests associated with wetlands, coastal areas, river deltas. India actually has a huge area classified as wetlands, though the sources note about 70% of that is actually under paddy cultivation.
Ah, okay, so not all natural wetland forests.
Right, but key natural types include mangroves.
Ah, the salt-tolerant trees that grow in coastal mud.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're amazing plants, adapted to grow right in salt marshes, tidal creeks, river estuaries. They form dense thickets, great habitat for fish nurseries, birds. India has a significant area of mangroves, about 7% of the world's total.
Where are the main mangrove areas?
The most extensive are in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands and the Sundarbans Delta in West Bengal, but also important patches in the deltas of the Mahanadi, Godavari, and Krishna rivers. Like many wetlands, they're under pressure from human activities, so conservation is crucial.
Conservation comes up a lot. Is there a national policy for forests?
Yes, India has a national forest policy, updated in 1988. The main aims are sustainable management, conserving what's there, expanding forest cover, and meeting the needs of local people who depend on forests.
What's the target for forest cover?
The big goal is to have 33%, one-third of India's geographical area under forest or tree cover. That's ambitious, requiring a lot of afforestation. Other goals include protecting biodiversity, preventing soil erosion and desertification, controlling floods and droughts.
And involving people.
Crucially, yes. The policy emphasizes making it a people's movement, involving communities, especially women, in planting and protecting trees.
And forests are obviously vital for tribal communities.
Absolutely central for many tribal groups. The forest is their home, their livelihood, the source of food, materials, culture. The policy recognizes this deep connection and aims to integrate traditional knowledge, supporting tribals not just as collectors of forest produce, but as active managers and growers.
Are there specific programs mentioned to boost tree cover?
Yeah, things like social forestry, managing forests on community or degraded lands for local benefit. Agroforestry, combining trees and crops on the same farmland. Community forestry, planting trees on public lands like roadsides or village pastures. And farm forestry, encouraging individual farmers to plant trees on their own land, sometimes with government support like free seedlings.
So a multi-pronged approach. Now, forests mean wildlife. India's wildlife heritage is huge too, right?
Immense. Home to maybe 4 or 5% of all known plant and animal species on Earth. That biodiversity is directly linked to the habitat diversity we've been talking about.
But it's under threat.
Sadly, yes. Habitat loss is the big one, clearing land for agriculture, industry, infrastructure. Plus, poaching, unsustainable harvesting of forest products, grazing pressure, forest fires. Many species have declined. Some are endangered.
Are there efforts to protect wildlife?
Yes, there's a long tradition of reverence for nature in India, reflected in stories and culture. Modern efforts include a network of protected areas. The sources mention 101 national parks and 553 wildlife sanctuaries.
That sounds like a lot.
It is significant. Plus, participation in international programs like UNESCO's Man and Biosphere program, which designates biosphere reserves, large areas protecting entire ecosystems, and specific targeted conservation projects for endangered species like Project Tiger, Project Elephant, and others for crocodiles, rhinos, etc.
So, government action, but the sources also mention individual responsibility.
Definitely. They emphasize that conservation can't just be a government job. It needs everyone's participation and commitment.
Okay, so we've covered the land, the climate, the plants, the animals. But living with such powerful natural systems also means dealing with natural hazards.
Yes. The flip side of geographical diversity and dynamism is vulnerability to natural disasters.
How is disaster defined in the sources?
They reference India's Disaster Management Bill of 2005. It defines a disaster as a major undesirable event, usually sudden and caused by natural or human factors, that seriously disrupts life and property, causing death or injury, and overwhelms local capacity to cope. Natural disasters are the subset caused by natural forces.
And India is particularly prone.
Highly prone. The environmental diversity itself creates vulnerabilities. Mountains mean landslides and earthquakes. Long coasts mean cyclones and tsunamis. The monsoon means floods and droughts. Plus, a large, dense population, especially in some hazard-prone areas, increases the potential impact. The sources state about 2/3 of the country is vulnerable to some form of disaster.
Let's look at some specifics. Earthquakes are mentioned as really unpredictable and damaging.
They are. The most severe ones are tectonic, caused by the movement of Earth's plates releasing energy along fault lines. India has a history of devastating quakes, especially in the Himalayan region, but also surprisingly in areas thought to be stable, like Gujarat and Maharashtra.
Lathar earthquake, for example.
Exactly. That 1993 Latur quake in Maharashtra on the supposedly stable Deccan Plateau was a wake-up call. It led scientists to reevaluate seismic risks, even in peninsular India, suggesting hidden faults might exist.
And India has seismic zones mapped out.
Yes. Based on past earthquake data and tectonic understanding, the country is divided into zones of varying seismic risk, from very high risk down to very low risk. This helps guide building codes and preparedness.
What are the effects of earthquakes beyond shaking?
Well, the ground itself can fissure, slide, or even liquefy if the soil is saturated. Structures can crack, settle, overturn, collapse, and there are knock-on effects. Landslides are often triggered, which can block rivers, create temporary lakes.
Which could then burst and cause floods downstream.
Exactly, a cascade of hazards.
And since you can't prevent earthquakes,
the focus has to be on mitigation and preparedness. Things like setting up monitoring centers for early warning, though predicting quakes precisely is still impossible, creating detailed vulnerability maps, public awareness campaigns, and crucially, enforcing earthquake-resistant building designs, especially in high-risk zones. Using lighter materials helps too.
Okay. Another major hazard mentioned is tsunamis.
Right. Giant sea waves, usually triggered by underwater earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, or landslides.
Not like normal wind waves.
Not at all. They travel incredibly fast in deep water, but might only be a meter high out at sea. The danger is when they reach shallow coastal water. They slow down, pile up, and can become terrifyingly high, 15 meters or even more, crashing inland with immense force.
Where are they most common?
The Pacific Ring of Fire is notorious,
Yeah.
but they also affect coastlines in the Indian Ocean, including Southeast Asia and India itself, as tragically seen in 2004.
And droughts, linked back to the monsoon's variability.
Yes. Mitigation there involves promoting drought-resistant crops, training farmers, and investing in water conservation, like rainwater harvesting, to capture and store water when it does rain.
Makes sense. And landslides, you mentioned earthquakes can trigger them.
They can, but landslides also happen due to heavy rain saturating slopes, undercutting by rivers, or sometimes human activity like road construction in unstable areas. They involve the rapid downslope movement of rock, soil, and debris.
Are they as widespread a risk?
They are very significant, especially in mountainous regions. Like earthquakes, India has landslide vulnerability zones mapped out.
From very high to low.
Yes. Very high vulnerability in young, active mountain ranges like the Himalayas, Andaman and Nicobar, parts of the Western Ghats. High vulnerability in similar regions, moderate to low in more stable areas or those with less rainfall, though mining activities can trigger slides even there. Large parts of the plains are generally safe.
What are the main impacts of landslides?
Locally, they can bury villages or infrastructure, but the wider impact often comes from blocking transport routes, roads, railways cutting off communities, and, like we said, blocking rivers, which poses a major flood risk if the blockage gives way suddenly. It makes development and even just travel very difficult and costly in vulnerable areas.
How can landslides be mitigated? It sounds tricky if they're localized.
It is tricky and needs area-specific solutions. Measures include restricting construction in the most hazardous zones, promoting safer agricultural practices like terrace farming instead of slope cultivation, like chumming or shifting cultivation, which destabilizes slopes.
Terrace farming helps hold the soil.
Yes, it breaks the slope and controls water runoff. Other positive actions are large-scale afforestation tree roots, bind soil, and building check dams or bunds to control water flow.
So earthquakes, tsunamis, droughts, landslides, a lot to manage. India has a framework for this now.
Yes, the Disaster Management Bill passed in 2005 established a national framework in institutions like the National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA, and the National Institute of Disaster Management, NIDM.
What does that framework involve?
It emphasizes a cycle of management. There's the pre-disaster phase, preparedness, mitigation, prevention, early warning systems, public awareness. Then, during the disaster, coordinated rescue, relief, providing immediate aid like shelter, food, medical help, and post-disaster, rehabilitation, reconstruction, and importantly, learning lessons to improve preparedness for the next time, building back better.
Seems like a necessary step given the scale of vulnerability.
Absolutely. Recognizing that such a large part of the country and population is vulnerable has made a more systematic, proactive approach essential. It's a move away from just reacting after the event towards managing the risk beforehand.
Wow. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground, literally. From India's precise place on Earth, influencing time and temperature, through the rhythm and power of the monsoon shaping seasons and rainfall, exploring the amazing variety of forests and wildlife that results, and facing the reality of the natural hazards that come with such a dynamic landscape.
And I think the main thing that stands out from all these sources is just how deeply intertwined everything is. You can't really understand the vegetation without understanding the climate. You can't understand the climate without understanding the location and the mountains. And you can't understand the hazard profile without understanding all of those underlying geographical factors.
It's all one system. The location and size create the potential for diversity. The climate, driven by the monsoon, realizes that potential in terms of water and temperature patterns. That shapes the vegetation. And the physical processes involved the mountains, the rainfall, the coasts also create the specific hazards.
Exactly. And grasping that interconnectedness isn't just academic, is it? It's crucial for thinking about real-world things, like how to conserve biodiversity effectively, how to manage water resources sustainably, and how to prepare communities for the inevitable natural challenges they face.
Definitely. So here's a final thought for you listening. We've seen how India's incredible geographical diversity, the sheer range of landscapes, climates, life forms is a defining feature. But we've also seen how that same diversity contributes directly to its vulnerability to specific natural hazards. How does really appreciating this unity and diversity of India's physical environment change how we understand both the opportunities and the challenges inherent in living within the embrace of nature's power there? Something to mull over.